Jacoby from Deeds of Flesh, and you're listening to the Phantasm Podcast.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy.
You are listening to Phantasm Podcast.
Hey, this is Trevor Sternad.
Ryan X back from the Black Dahlia murder.
Tom Gabriel Warrior. Eric Green from Simple Tour.
Ross Dolan from Immolation.
We are Gorgasm.
Ismail from Creator.
This is RDC of Body Count.
Terrence from Suffocation.
Phantasm Podcast.
Join your host Corey Gorchrist and Dr. Vincent West for exclusive interviews with the sickest bands in metal and more. Head over to cultofphantasm.com, the only gravesite for all things horror and death metal. No filler, all killer.
Sell the metal! Sell the metal! Sell the metal! Sell the metal!
Hi, this is Dr. Vincent West, medical doctor with the Phantasm Podcast, and my first guest of 2021 is someone I'm so excited to have on today. And we have Jacoby from Deeds of Flesh, one of my favorite death metal bands in the world, and we're going to be talking about Nucleus, their latest album, which came out December 11th on Unique Leader Records. And sir, how are you doing today?
Great, man. Good to be here.
Thank you so much for doing this, man. What a record, man. You guys, wow. I heard this thing for the first time and I was like, holy shit, there's so many guests. The drumming's incredible, the guitar playing's incredible, your vocals are incredible. Dude, it's the whole package on a death metal album. And just to kind of start out for our listeners and for myself included, can you talk about how you came to be in Deeds of Flesh and how that started way back when?
Well, I was in a band called THC. Actually, myself and Joey Heaslett, the original drummer for Deeds, we were both in a thrash metal band. Some elements of death metal in it, but mostly a thrash metal band. And Eric was in another band called Charlie Christ. And they were also more of a thrash metal / creator-ish band.
Okay.
And, we started jamming next door to each other in a storage place. They had a garage next to us, and we would hear each other playing. And, that's kind of how we met for the most part. And, in between songs, we'd take breaks and open up the garage and just sit there and have a beer or something and talk to each other. And, one of those times that I think Eric was like, hey, you heard this one band that, you should come over to my house and check it out. Well, I got some music to show you. And so I went over to his house and we ended up listening to like Gorguts, Consider Dead, or
such a good album.
Just different death metal bands, and just talking to each other, going, dude, yeah, I'm really into this stuff right now. It's pretty sick. And we thought about it. We're like, man, we should maybe jam together sometime. We'll, me and you, and we'll get your drummer because your drummer's faster than mine. And that's how it happened, man. We showed up one day when the other bands weren't playing, and we jammed. And we wrote a whole song in one sitting, and it was like we wrote 3-minute crawl space in probably 2 hours, and that was it. And it was like, oh, dude, we've got something here. We need to quit our other bands and just do this. And I shit you not, like the next day, we both quit our bands and started Deeds. And then that's how it happened, man. From there, we did a whole lot of snail mail back in the days, email or snail mailing to like Internal Bleeding and Dying Fetus and all the other underground death metal bands.
Sure.
That was the internet before the internet was around, and it kind of just grew from there, man.
Now, Deeds, was that now? Were you guys in San Diego, Bay Area? Was that?
No, we were in Los Osos, California.
Okay.
Like Central California. California, in between LA and Frisco on the coast.
Oh, nice. Yeah, the California scene, to me, is just important as like the Tampa scene, man. You guys were especially Possessed, because I guess, how do you feel about, who started what? But Possessed to me, and you go back and forth, people are Death, and I love Death. I saw Death. Shit. Spiritual Healing, I think, was the first time I saw Death. So,
I mean, both sides of the United States have super important bands, in my view. I was inspired by the bands more in Florida than I was in California. Early on, it was California because we had a big thrash scene over here.
Sure.
But once I got introduced to death metal, I was all Florida, or at least everything coming out of Scott Burns' studio.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. And then, of course, the New York stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You got Suffocation, and then Canada with Gorguts, and there was a lot of early bands that inspired us. But we would sit there, we would listen to it, we would get all jacked up, and okay, let's go jam, and then let's try to make it even more intense and more crazy and more chaotic, and that was kind of our goal in the beginning, just write some chaotic music. And we weren't well-trained musicians, so everything came from, memory and, hearing. We didn't write any of the music out, we didn't tab any of the music out, it was just all from memory. So
sure.
Maybe that contributes to our writing style, and it was pretty chaotic back in the day. Pretty much all the way through Deeds until I left the band in 2007. That's how we did things.
So
we would have to go back after the album and tab out all the songs, because once we practiced the crap out of those songs for however long before we recorded them, we wouldn't play them for a while. Sometimes we wouldn't play the songs ever because we just never played them live.
Sure.
We'd have to tab them out so we could remember them.
And then early on, I've always wanted to ask you this. So, what's one of the first big tours you guys hopped on back in the day?
The first tour we actually did was a tour we self-promoted with Us and Dying Fetus. So
really?
We booked half the shows from California out to Texas. They booked the other half of the shows on the East Coast, and we toured together, man. We jumped in a van. We met them. I don't even remember where we met them. I think we met them halfway, and we started touring, man.
That's
awesome.
That was
the very first tour. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, that's great, man.
I mean, the first European tour we did with Incantation, that was when we were on Repulse Records from Spain.
Okay.
That was a really fun tour. The first big U.S. tour, I would say, other than the Bloodletting tours that we were doing, was the tour of Cannibal. That was amazing,
Now, what Cannibal tour did you all do?
Oh, God. It was Cannibal, us, Macabre. I think Cephalic Carnage was on that tour.
I saw that tour. What album was that? I'm trying to remember what Cannibal record that was.
Yeah, that was the one after Vile, I believe.
Oh, shit. That was Gallery of Suicide.
I think so.
Yeah, I remember yeah, man. That's awesome. I remember that bill. That bill was ridiculous.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was a really fun tour. All them guys are super cool. We had a blast with those guys.
That's amazing, man. And then let me ask you this. So Nucleus is so it's so complete. It's such a complete album. And we're going to dive right into this. So how does Nucleus come about? Like, what, if you could take me through that, how did you guys?
Well, the music was written already. So the music was written and recorded before Eric passed away.
Okay.
And so from what I know, Eric wrote about a third of the album's riffs. And then the other 60% was divvied out between Craig Peters and Ivan, the bass player.
Yes.
And so all the music was written and recorded and done. And Eric sat around on it for a year. He was trying to figure out what he was going to do with it lyrically. Was he going to keep going the sci-fi route? Was he going to totally change and do something different?
Sure.
He just didn't know. So, the album sat around, and then he got sick, and then unfortunately he passed away. And
I'm sorry about that too, man. That's
I didn't even
awful.
learn about the music until I was on the way to the funeral, and Mike Hamilton was telling me, dude, there's a whole album recorded with no vocals on it. And I was like, oh shit. And that's like the spark moment I knew, well, I got to do it because no one else is coming in here and doing it. So it's got to be me. You know, the only other original vocalist, you know, so it's going to be me.
Sure.
So I'm like heading to the funeral, like, okay, that's what's going to happen. It's already in my head. And so yeah, so the music's recorded. I'm thinking, okay, I got to do the vocals, but at the same time, it was like, okay, well, it was always me and Eric. You know, we were always doing dual vocals.
Sure.
How am I going to do this thing by myself? And then Mike's like, well, dude, why don't we get some guest vocalists to come in and do some different parts on the album? And I was like, well, that'd be great. That'd be cool, and it'd be kind of like a memorial for Eric. You know, we get all his friends from the past, and you know, just do the album that way. So that way, it's not just me on the whole album. And then that's how the guest vocalist came about. We didn't know who was going to be on it. We didn't know what tracks or nothing. We just said, okay, let's do guest vocalists. And then over the course of after the funeral and everything, we started writing out a list of guys we wanted to be on the album. And the list is actually bigger than who's on the album. It's just we didn't have. It would have been too much. If we had our whole list, it would have been over.
Oh wow, okay.
So it was kind of that we had 4 really important guys that we wanted to be on it. They're all on it, and then the rest of the guys, you know, we kind of peppered in as kind of a first come, first, you know, you're on, and then once it got to a certain number, we're like, okay, that's enough. We can't take anymore. But yeah, that's how that whole situation came out. And then when I was listening to the music, I would try to take each track and, you know, try to imagine, okay, what track is going to fit which vocal style. And there was an obvious choice for Cannibal, for George. There was an obvious choice for Gorguts. There was an obvious choice for Gallagher.
Sure.
Gallagher's song was originally Frank's song.
Really?
Frank came in so late, literally 3 days before we had to turn in the final mix. Derek Boyer called me up and goes, Frank's going to do it. I'm like, what? So literally, I had to go through other songs and find parts that I already did and say, okay, what part can I give to Frank that sounds like Frank, you know? So I found the spot for him, and that was totally last minute. I didn't think that was going to happen at all, but that was cool.
That's great,
so, you know, it's just funny how the songs morphed out to where they all sound like their little parts sound like that band. That was never written to be that way or anything. I just, you know, it just worked out that way.
I mean, what a glowing tribute to him too. Like to get all these guys. I mean, it's great, man. It's like I couldn't believe.
I mean, the biggest one for me would have been Luc Lemay. If he heard that song, that would have brought a tear to his eye. I think because back in the day we were huge Gorguts fans.
Right.
So having Luc do his song was amazing. That was my favorite moment, I think, of the whole recording, getting Luke's vocals back and just
sure.
Like giddy like a little schoolboy, just going, dude, Luke Lemay's on the album, man.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It was pretty cool.
It is. Well, let's hop into some of these songs here. So we'll start out with the first track. Tell me a little bit about Odyssey.
The first track's kind of an intro. It's kind of meant for anybody who's listening to this album who hasn't heard the last two, because this is kind of a trilogy and it's the end of the story. And if you don't know about what the last two albums vocally were about, that's kind of just a summary of we're sometime in the future, aliens have totally kicked our asses, and the future is looking pretty bleak kind of deal. And so I wrote that as like a little summary to what happened in the last two albums, kind of bring you up to speed in the story. And then I had my daughter do the reading in the studio, and
awesome.
She nailed it. I was really trying to go for that creepy girl, you know, in that Resident Evil movie. That was like the AI.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was the AI of the computer, you know. It was the software engineer's daughter who get out, you're all gonna die,
Right.
So I was thinking of that when I had her do the reading. And she, obviously she's not British, she's from California, so I had to make her do it in a British style accent. I think she did great.
Oh, it's great, man. I had no idea. That's really cool.
Yeah, she's only 11 years old when she did it, so it was pretty amazing. Yeah.
Killing it. I loved it. And let's see. Yeah, man, it's awesome. Track 2, Alien Scourge.
That is kind of more of a prologue to the album, kind of again taking you from where we are currently, moving into the story. So it's kind of more of a prologue. So some things that have already happened in the very last album are happening still in Alien Scourge, and then we're moving through the story.
Okay, and then if you don't care on each one too, like was track 2? Is there guests on that one?
There's no guests on that one.
Okay.
The special thing about that song is the very opening screen is myself and Eric.
Really? That's awesome.
I grabbed a vocal from Eric from Crown of Souls.
Okay.
For that part, and stuck it in there because I wanted his voice to be, once the music starts, I wanted his voice to be the first you hear and the last you hear. So the first vocal on the album is me and him, not counting Odyssey, of course. And then the last vocal on Terror is Eric alone.
Oh, that's awesome.
His vocal sending off into the ether,
Amazing. Okay, yeah. And then let's see, track 3, Ascension Vortex.
So that's got the most vocalists on it. That's got Bill, Decrepit Bill. He did all the highs, I think, in that song. There might be one part that he didn't do highs, but he did most of the highs in that song, and some of the backup lows. He nailed it. And then let me just get to open. See, I know Obi Flett is in that song.
Nice.
And Obi and I go way back. Let's see, I'm gonna open up my. And then Anthony from Odious Mortem.
Okay.
Also, Set the Savior. He's in that song as well. So there's 3 vocalists in that song with myself included. Actually, 4 with me.
That's awesome.
And that song was mostly written by Craig Peters.
Okay.
So I don't think Eric had much to do with that song. Maybe just some arrangements, but that was mostly a Craig Peters song. So it was the most, I would say that's almost the least sounding Deed song on the album. If I go back and I think of like typical Deed songs, that one kind of deviates just a little bit. But when I got this whole album musically, when I was listening to it, it was like, I didn't write any of this music, so I was coming at a full on different way of writing. Because I was used to, okay, me and Eric, we write, we arrange, we go write vocals, and we do them. But this was so different, man. I struggled writing the vocal patterns, especially for that song, just because it was so different from what I was used to. So Craig actually helped me out with the vocal patterns on that song, because I was like, man, there's probably like 8 different demos of that song that sound totally different.
Oh, wow.
And there was parts of it I liked, but I never could grasp the whole song and be like, yeah, that's sick. It was always like, I'm going to leave that song to last because I can't quite figure it out. But so that song was kind of the outlier, and that's probably why there's so many guest vocalists on it, because it helped having different voices in on certain parts, because it was so different in the style.
I love the song myself. I think it's awesome.
Good.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. Let's see, track 4, Catacombs of the Monolith.
So that is that's our Luke LeMay song, and that song is amazing. That song is started out with a completely different name, but the name really didn't fit our story arc. So that song's more of a. Let's see if I can explain this right. those people in the know out there, they back in the last album, the aliens had developed this temple, basically where they have these machines that just suck the soul out of your body and use it as energy. And the energy powers their weapons and their technology. And so, in the last album, the aliens either on purpose or on accident unleashed the xenovirus, and the xenovirus kind of took over everything. So their harvest temples that they had got completely destroyed by these huge xenomorph beasts, for lack of a better term. So with the temples all being destroyed, in this new story, they had to move the temple off planet because those huge beasts were just engorging the whole earth. So this is kind of a story of the temple being moved to, another place. And the Ascension Vortex is essentially a method to get humanity over to that temple to suck out their life energy to power their technology. So it's kind of nerdy.
No, that's awesome, dude. I'm a huge dork.
That's where he went with it. So that's where he went with it. I had to follow it. I had to keep going. It's
great.
Totally different writing style than I've ever done. So it's probably why it took us so long to do it. But yeah, so Luke LeMay came in for that song, and he killed it, man. We gave him some patterns, said, okay, here's what we think it should sound like for you. And we tried, Mike Hamilton helped me out a lot with that song vocally, because he was demoing his inner Luke voice, and it came out so perfect. It was funny. We were all laughing at it because
that's awesome.
He's not a vocalist, but he was doing Luke LeMay, and it sounded so cool. But so we gave him patterns. Said, okay, here, have at it. If you want to do something different, that's cool. And he came back with a fully different take than we sent out, and it was so much better than what we had sent him. We were sitting there when we first heard it, and we were just like, dude, Luke is the man. And I was so humbled and so happy to be working with that guy. And he is probably one of the coolest humans in death metal I've ever met. And I met some really cool guys.
Ridiculously talented, too. My God, his band.
Yeah, ridiculous.
His band he has now, like the Masquerade in Atlanta, the OG Masquerade closed a few years ago, and one of the last shows I saw in there was Gorguts. And the band he has assembled around him currently, those guys are, you can't even talk to those dudes. They're just so like musical and stuff. Like I was trying to like talk to them after I was trying to talk to Luke. Luke's like, oh, they're cool. They're just really into their music, and they're like stupid ridiculous. Like the bass player and the it's like Jesus. This guy puts bands together out of like I don't know how he does it. It's crazy. But I wanted to ask you. So Mike, is Mike on the album at all? He's not, is he? Or is he?
He is. Well, Mike's voice is in Odyssey, so he's the guy dying. He produced all the dying sounds.
Okay.
And the soldier sounds. That was all Mike.
Okay.
He's in a few other parts, but he just, for the most part on this album, I would say Mike wrote about 75% of the actual lyrics.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I came in and I wrote a lot too, but a lot of the inspiration came from Mike. Just because, I'm not a science fiction writer. When I used to write back in the day, I was writing about, the dark side of the human condition or historical events. I would read massive books and stuff just to come up with songs,
Sure.
So this was a total different way of songwriting. And Mike, has a great imagination. So, we had a plan from the beginning. Okay, let's write the lyrics together. And dude, he nailed it. He had such good ideas. And I tweaked a lot of what he wrote, but the original inspiration, a lot of it came from Mike. So kudos to him. And he also helped out a lot with the vocal patterns as well. Me and him were demoing back and forth for a year before we finally, started recording some of this stuff. So he's all over the album in writing, for sure.
Funny story about him is as good of friends as I am with Ross, I've never hung out with Mike. Like, every time, it's always Ross and Matt and me hanging out when I go see Exhumed. And
you know why?
I have no. I mean, I don't know. I maybe you can tell me.
That dude works his ass off. When he's done playing, he's working. So he's either helping another drummer or he's loading up the whole dang stage. He's a worker, dude. That's why he doesn't hang out.
I've never got to really. He's so nice to me. He knows who I am. I mean, I've literally hung.
Yeah.
But it's always, Ross and Matt. That's who I'm hanging out with, and we're watching a movie and acting stupid, and it's fun. We have a great time. Ross has been so supportive of me in this podcast, but I've never really got to hang out with Mike. It's depressing. I love the guy to death. I've never even got to talk to him how much I love Deeds of Flesh. Like, we've never even really sat and talked. I've drank a beer with him, and that's about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hopefully, if the world turns back on at some point musically, you'll get to hang out with him. But if you hang out around the stage, you'll be able to hang out with him, because that's where he is. He's working, always working.
I never see him. I mean, seriously, Jacoby, it's funny. Like, I was sitting here thinking about it, and he's so nice. It's not that he's not. He's great, but it's just I'm always initially was with Ross, and then I got to know Matt real well, and then but yeah, I never see him. And you're right. I guess he's out busting his tail there doing stuff. So.
Yep, that's it. That's what it is. Man.
Well, I love to hear that he's on the. That's great that he was involved with the record, because I wasn't sure about that. I was trying to do reading about it, and I didn't see this, so that's fantastic to know that. Again,
Mike was like the longest, standing member besides myself and Eric. So
sure.
And he was also the best friend of Eric besides myself. So
I did not know that. That's awesome.
And Maddie, of course. So when Eric passed away, it was me, Mike, and Maddie, and our friend Steve. And Jamie, the new owner of Unique Leader. We were all there together.
Okay.
So when the plan came together for this album, Mike had to be involved. I was like, yes, dude, you got to be involved, because this is Deeds. This is Eric's legacy, and we got to send it out on a high note, and that was always the plan. It's got to be great, or it's not seeing the light of day. That was kind of our deal.
Well, you did, man. Like I said, we could just keep diving here. It is unreal. This record's so good. Catacombs, fantastic song. I love that. Let's see, track 5, Ethereal Ancestors.
Yeah, that's George's track, and that was always going to be George's track, because of the sound of it, and we had written some of the vocals, and I'd say that song, for the most part, well, yeah, I mean, I did a lot of the lyrics on that song. I think that was about 50-50, me and Mike, at least with the tweaking and stuff, and I heard George's voice on that song, so that was always his song. And he almost didn't make it, too. I mean, he had to go over to Rutan's place to record, and they were right in the middle of mixing the Cannibal album, and so, I mean, he was busy. He was a busy guy, so that barely happened. So there is a version with just me.
Really?
And that version's really good too. I'm not gonna lie, but I'm stoked he came through, man, in the end, and did that song. That's a monster song. It's probably one of my top 2 on the whole album. I love that song, man.
It's and you can tell it's George immediately too. It's very it's oh yeah, man. It's
even the patterns I wrote on that song, I wanted it fast, and I wanted it with the rhythm, kind of how George sings. So I wrote a lot of those vocal patterns thinking about how he sings on a record. So it would fit, and it sounds freaking sick, man.
Well, to me. And the for me, and I don't know what your take is on this. And again, I hope it's a compliment. I don't mean it in any other way. It sounds more like his Monstrosity stuff. That's what I loved about it. I was like,
well, I mean, yeah, and when I think of George, probably because I'm 46 years old, I think of George almost Monstrosity first, just because that's where I first.
Same here, my friend.
George is Cannibal and has been Cannibal for decades now.
Sure.
My mind goes back to those Monstrosity songs, and so.
Speaking with Eric, now, have you ever worked with Eric Rutan before? Just out of side note there.
Well, I mean, we toured with him. Hate Eternal. We did a tour in Europe.
Okay.
So I don't know if that counts as working with him, but I mean, dude, the guy was awesome. Love that dude.
I love him to death, man.
He was so fun to be around, and that tour was something I'll never forget, man. It was a really fun tour, and I was happy to be back in touch with him. I'll put it that way.
Dude, when I went, and again, this is no knock, and I won't even say who else they were on tour with, but I don't know how anyone follows that man on stage. Seriously, he's intense, and I met him about 10 years ago. He had played in a club where I was living at the time, and I was working as a stagehand there. So I met him during the day, and he was working out. He's like, "Come on, lift that fucking shit, lift those fucking." He's like my drill sergeant, and that's how we met. That's how I met him, and I took him and he got him and the band food and everything. We kind of became friends after that. And this is all me doing the podcast, but I'll never forget that. He was like a drill sergeant out there having me try to lift his weights. I'm like, "Eric, I can't lift." He's like, "Come on, lift that fucking shit." I'm like, "Okay, I'm trying to lift it. I can't. I'm trying." He's like, "Lift that fucking shit." And I finally got it up and blew my back out. But
there it is. The Rutan is a mix between a drill sergeant and that Muppet guy Animal.
But dude, seriously, I don't know how anyone follows that man on stage. Like, he is so intense, and like, I remember the first time I saw him with Morbid Angel, and I was like, man, this guy is fucking awesome. Like, and we're talking like, this was like Covenant. But then even after, like, when Tucker joined and stuff, like I remember seeing him on the Formulas tour, and my God, man, I think that may have been the perfect like era of Morbid Angel for me, because it was so nasty, like just him and Steve, and then the whole thing. So it's really cool. But yeah, I love the guy, man. I got on a tangent there about it, but it's so cool that he was able to help George and contribute to the album there on the song, because that song's ridiculous. It's like
sure, man. I got a funny little story. We were I think we were somewhere in Germany. Trying to remember the year. It was a year where the Philadelphia Eagles were in the NFC Championship game, and it was like 3 a.m. over there, and the game was just starting, and we had already played in the club, and the club owner said, "I have satellite TV," and Rutan's like, "You got the game? Put that shit on the fucking TV." And we sat there. We made ourselves literally late to the next show because we watched the NFC Championship in Germany. Everybody screaming. It felt like we were in America, dude. It was so funny, and Rutan is such a huge Eagles fan.
Dude, yeah, he is.
That was one of the best days of his life.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
It was a blast. Yeah.
So. The last time we hung out, because I'm a Saints fan, so we're always like, and they beat us this year. So I get a text at like 1 or 2 in the morning. It's like, "Take that." It's like, dude, like, really? So we've gone back and forth, but no, the last time we had him on the podcast, that's all we did was talk about football for that year.
That's fun.
So that was fun. But
for his contribution for hooking up the recording with George, because none of these guys, got paid for any of this. It was all kind of just done out of, honor to Eric.
Sure.
Mike and I was like, dude, we got to do something for these guys. We ended up sending Rutan a Philadelphia Eagles original jersey with his name on it.
You did.
Corpse Shredder got a Denver Broncos jersey, so that was kind of our just little nod to like, hey, thanks, guys. And so hopefully, I'm sure he'll wear it at some point on stage.
You just gave me an idea. I need to get, if George will ever do it, because George always kind of hinted I could get him to do it, and then it's like there's never time. But I'd love to get him and Eric both so we could talk football. That would be fun.
There you go.
That would be nuts.
Or fishing.
Now, do you follow sports at all, Jacoby?
Yeah. I mean, I do. I was a huge football fan back in the day, but now that I have a family and a business and other things, I'm too damn busy.
I understand. Well, either way, that song, dude, Ethereal Ancestors is fucking awesome. And as a side note, I don't know if Eric was or not. I'm a huge Stargate fan, and I love his lyrics. I love the flavor of these records. I love it. The last three. It's fucking fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Let's see here. So track 6, Nucleus.
Yeah, Nucleus was kind of, that was the track that I had originally kind of set aside for Frank Mullen.
Okay.
But Frank was harder to get a hold of. I was kind of going through Derek Boyer because Derek was, you know, a buddy of mine since Decrepit Birthday.
I love Derek. Love him to death.
He was actually in Deeds for a Brazil tour, and then he said,
really?
Screw that, man. There's too many 16th notes.
I did not know he played with you all. I'll have to ask him about that. That's awesome.
Yeah, he did Brazil with Eric and Brad when we had Brad.
Oh, that's awesome.
That was for Embry, that album.
Oh, that's awesome.
I was in school. I couldn't do the tour, so he stepped in and did that tour for us. But anyway, so I was going through Derek kind of as the third person because Frank has been retired, you know. He's not even in the game anymore, so getting a hold of him was a tough one. But, yeah, so that was originally set aside for Frank. And then it just looked like Frank wasn't going to be able to do it, so I had John Gallagher set for another song. And I just reached out to John and said, okay, you know, can you do this song? I showed him the parts, and he's like, yeah, man, yeah, I can do that. And I was just, you know, I was stoked to get John on there because I think probably us and Dying Fetus have the most history, other than Cephalic Carnage, of doing past tours together,
right? And
you know, just hanging out together. So John for me was instrumental to get on this album just because of the history we've had with those guys.
Sure.
So, I was stoked he did it. He nailed it. I mean, it's signature Gallagher vocals, and I'm just super happy about that.
Oh, it's fucking fantastic, man. It's great. Of course, title track of the album. It's awesome too. And he did that too as well, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and then Matt Patella did the guest solo on the end, and that was great as well. So he actually made it on the video as well. So that the last solo on the video, that's Matt playing.
Okay. And by the way, if I may say this, the drummer that is on this record, I am not familiar with, and he is unfucking real.
Yeah, Jared Seska, that guy's a monster, dude.
He's unreal.
He does a lot of projects. I mean, if you go back to some of his YouTube stuff, he's playing stuff from the last album from Deeds, and he's just nailing it. That guy's he's talented.
Dude, it's ridiculous. Seriously, really, I'm not just saying that. Like, it is absolutely just ridiculous, the drumming on this record.
Yeah, Eric and Mike handpicked him to take Mike's spot because Mike couldn't do this album back a few years ago when Eric recorded it because he had some personal issues going on and he couldn't do the recording.
Sure.
So they both handpicked him to do the album. So, yeah, I mean, he's been sitting around on this album for years waiting for it to come out.
He is. I'm not familiar with him, and he is unreal, man. That guy is fast.
Yeah,
it's
really good drummer. So, stoked to have him.
All right, let's see here. Track 7, Races Conjoined.
Yeah, Races Conjoined. That's a crazy song. That's a kind of a mix mash of riffs. Eric was going to join or at least write for Disgorge at one point, and he had a bunch of Disgorge riffs sitting off to the side.
Are you serious?
He threw him into that song. And the funny story about that song is that song's actually about a minute and a half longer, the original version. And when I came in to write the vocal patterns, I heard that song and I'm like, dude, this is not a Deed song. It's a Disgorge song. It sounded like a Disgorge song. And
I can hear, now that you say that, it's kind of, yeah, I mean.
I picked it up right away. I'm like, dude, this is a Disgorge song. The song that you haven't heard is very Disgorge. The new version that we kind of edited down is more of a Deed song than it is a Disgorge song. So it took some creative editing to get it to where it is. But yeah, so that's kind of the funny story behind that. And that's Matty Way is on that song. John Zig, who is actually an artist of ours forever, is on that song.
Nice.
He's actually a really good vocalist too. He's been in a bunch of bands He's on that song, and then Frank Mullen, of course, came in at the last minute. And thanks to Derek Boyer and Terrence for hooking that up for sure.
Dude, you want to talk about, those are the two nicest dudes since I've been doing this podcast. Bend over backwards for me every time they tour, and treat me. They treat me like I'm family every time I go. You know, it's every time. And Terrence greets me not with my podcast name but my real name, and it makes me feel like $1,000,000 because I've literally listened to that band since I was 16. So.
Dude, they're the original death metal band in my view. I mean, I hear them, and that death metal started with Suffolk for me.
Oh man, I can't agree more. And I'm still really good friends with Mike Smith, and I love the band. I love those guys. They're one of my favorites. I just love those dudes to death. I love that Ricky's in it now. You know, speaking of Disgorge, so that's fun, and I just love them to death.
What a trip. Yeah, Ricky, I mean, that's a trip in itself. I mean, Ricky at one point was going to play drums for us, and it didn't work out logistically. But, so, I mean, I've seen what he's doing, and it's amazing, man. I'm stoked for Ricky. I just, for me, it was Frank that had to be on the album just because of the history.
No, dude, are you kidding? No, I mean, look, the tank, man. You got to have the tank.
Frank's tank, got to do that.
Dude, funny story about him. Couple of years ago, this is how much of a Suffocation fan I am. Not knocking what I'm about to tell you, but King Diamond was playing near where we were. It was either go see Suffocation or King Diamond. We went to see Suffocation. I'm like, we got to go, and we go, and we took Frank some Crown Royal apple, and the reason we took it to him, the year previous to this, my co-host had seen him at Maryland Death Fest, and he was up there. He goes, "Crown Apple go down so fucking smooth," and so we thought it was just funny. So when we started the podcast, we were like, we ever go see him, and we got to take him about a Crown Apple, right? So every time we would see Frank, up until he retired, we always took him a thing of Crown Apple, and he was always like, "Oh man, this stuff," and then he would say it sometimes, and we would just sit there like children watching. He'd be like, "This stuff goes down so fucking smooth." It's just funny. But dude, you gotta have Frank, and I'm just happy for Ricky because we saw them with Ricky, and then Frank came back. This was during I think one of those Summer Slaughter things or something, and then Frank was back, and then we saw him with Ricky again, and then it was that other cat was in there for a while that I guess did the record with Frank, their last album, and then Ricky's back again. So it's cool, man. It's always revolving doors. Those dudes, I love them to death. I love all of them. And Disgorge, actually, funny story. Disgorge and Dying Fetus are two bands I've never had on this podcast that I want. Those are two bucket list ones, like you. So maybe in the future, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, Diego is a really cool guy. He would. I'm sure he would do the podcast. So
I think the world of it. Well,
we hooked up with Diego for sure.
I would love that, man. Well, the thing with John, I'll tell you a funny story about John, and I love them, and I know they're really busy. Those dudes are busy, and
yeah, them dudes are busy.
Well, I almost had their drummer because of Visceral Disgorge, because I guess he was in that for a minute, and we were going to get him. This is a funny story, and this is not anything bad or anything else. And Terrence was trying to get me John. John's like, he doesn't want to do it. He's busy, whatever. I was like, that's cool. It's no big deal. Maybe one day, And but anyway, so the drummer, I can't think of that cat's name, but anyway, he was going to do it. We're in person. This was at a Summer Slaughter 4 or 5 years ago, and he was like, "Yeah, dude, I'll do it." He ends up getting into a fight with his girlfriend or wife, or it was, and we didn't end up getting to do it. So it was just like, oh, well, maybe next time. But they were super cool, but I also understand, those guys they're really big too. So it's like they don't, they want to probably talk about whatever, but it's cool. I get it. But anyway, moving on. That's Racist Conjoined is raunchy. That is one of my favorite songs on this album.
It's a nasty one for sure.
It's a good one, man. And like I said, I had no idea about, and talk about that a sec if you don't mind, not to stick on this, but so Eric was going to do stuff with Disgorge. God, I would have loved to have heard that.
I don't know the full story behind that. Maddie's going to know more about that probably than I would.
I'll have to ask you about that.
Dude, I was out of the game full on for 13 years. And
really?
So I missed a big chunk of everything. So, if you start asking me about stuff that happened 5 years ago,
Here's what was funny was the last time I saw Disgorge was with Broken Hope and Deicide, and that show was awesome. This was probably 5 years ago. And Angel was the vocalist for Disgorge, and that guy was fucking awesome. You know, all these different bands and everything intertwines, but it was like, I mean, that Angel dude, if you knew who I'm talking about, I don't know if you've ever seen, that guy was great. But
I don't actually. I just find it, I don't know if the word funny, it's different. The biggest difference I see in death metal now versus back in the day is it seems like everybody's in 4 or 5 different bands.
Yes, sir.
You know,
yes, sir.
It's a weird thing. It's like, I don't know. It's a huge difference now from when I was in the band. It seems like everybody's got a side gig, and I get it. You know, you gotta make a living somehow, and death metal is a hard life. You know,
sure.
It was a hard life the whole time I was in it, so I get it. But it's just it's a trip that way, man.
Well, that's like Frank. You know, the last time I saw him on that farewell thing they did, I didn't really. You know, Terrence had told me he had a job with like the state. He works, I guess, like some kind of water treatment thing in New York, and he makes killer money. So, you know.
Yeah. I mean, shoot, and you know that was kind of the case for me back in 2007 when I left, is because I found out I was going to be a father, and I was just sitting there going, I can't raise a family on death metal money.
Sure,
I can barely choose myself.
Sure, dude. Sure.
And I had just graduated from college, you know, so I was just like, the writing was on the wall. I got to step up. I got to provide for my family,
sure.
And I can't put those guys through limbo, you know, because I wouldn't have been able to put in the time they needed for me.
Sure.
You know, to move the band forward. So that's kind of why I stepped away in 2007. Was just I knew I had to support my family first. Because
that's very admirable, though, Jacoby. That's awesome that you did that. I think. I mean, you know.
Yeah, I mean, there comes a point in your life where you gotta choose a path, you know, and I didn't want to hamper the band. I knew the band had to go on, and
sure.
I knew they had to go on strong, and so it was easier for me to just step away than just sit there and put them in limbo. You know, I didn't want to do that.
It's very admirable, man. I mean, I think doing both.
Yeah, coming back now is a lot easier for me because I'm not depending on it, you know, money wise. You know,
sure.
I could give a crap less if we're going to get paid royalties at all.
Right.
I'm here for the love of the music, and it feels like it. You know, this time around feels way more like Trading Pieces than it did Crown of Souls. You know,
sure,
so
sure.
Me, it's a lot easier this time around. It's funner too.
Well, I mean, it's like I said, it shows on the album, and we'll keep going here. I'm sorry I keep getting off on tangents. I just love talking to you about this stuff. So track 8, Terror.
Terror is that's one of my favorite tracks on the album as well, mostly because it drives. It's driving all the way through the song. It's powerful. Dusty from Severed Savior back in the day freaking kills it on that song. That was my big shocker guest vocalist part. When I got his vocals back, I was like, holy shit, man, he killed it. You know, I love what he did with what I gave him, because I gave him the patterns to use, but he threw in a bunch of highs where I wasn't asking him to do highs, and I love what he did, man. I was stoked when I got that back. And then Bob Cox from Disavowed has been like, you know, my best friend from Europe since way back in the day, you know, and it was just great to have him back. You know, they just came out with another album this year.
Really?
So they're kind of doing a comeback thing. And just having him on the album was amazing as well. So, and he was there from the start. He's like, man, I want to be on the album, man. I want to be on the album. I'm like, you will be, I promise. And, you know, we made it happen. I'm just glad he's there.
You know, that song is nuts too. I remember the first time I listened, I was like, man, this thing is just flying. Like, it's just got so many different layers to it. Now, I wanted to ask you about, there's so many different layers to these songs. When I listen to it.
I mean, the writing style is pretty crazy musically. The vocal styles, you know, I wanted to kind of marry the old stuff with the new. Because,
right.
You know, Deeds has kind of changed directions ever since of What's to Come. You know, even the writing style is very different, probably because, you know, I wasn't there writing with Eric, so things obviously changed a lot.
Sure.
But I needed to have that old feeling with the new, and that was kind of my goal through this whole thing. Is like, okay, the music's insane. It's very new. It still has some old vibes though, and I think that's mostly because Ivan, the bass player, and Craig, they would go back and listen to the old stuff when they were writing for this album. So they had a lot of inspiration from our old songs.
Amazing.
When they were writing the new riffs for the album. So you've kind of got a marriage there of the old and the new in multiple ways. But for me, it was mostly like, okay, I want the vocals to be powerful enough to where it stands out, you know. And I think we got there.
You definitely did, man. That's a perfect description of the album. It's a beautiful marriage of the old with the new, and I love it. It's got so many different, and I listen to it on a really nice pair of Bose headphones, and it just sounds unreal. The album.
Dude, the louder it is, the better it is. That's what I love about this album. I'll crank it up, and I'm like, shit, okay, crank it up more, and the louder I play it, the better it sounds.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely, it sounds so good.
And that's a big, huge shout out to our engineer, man. My blank.
I do that all the time, dude.
Zach from Castle Ultimate.
Okay.
Dude,
yeah, he did a great job.
He's amazing, man. He's amazing. So he did our album, mixed it, mastered it. You know, it sat around for 3 years, and then I came back into the mix, started sending him vocal tracks, and he basically remixed it again. You know, because he had updated tools, and he's like,
sure.
Man, I've got all these new tools. I want to, retweak it. So he did a lot of work behind the scenes, kind of broed us out, when you didn't have to, and I was really stoked about that. So the guy's amazing. He's a genius. He did the Machine Head record right after ours. So I mean, he's doing some big stuff over there. He's just really cool guy, really cool, really down to earth, really up in your face too. If he doesn't like something, he'll tell you.
Well, that's good.
I had mentioned to him, I'm like, well, man, there's a lot of these songs that are just me, and I like the version. Maybe someday we'll put out like a bonus track or something here and there. He's like, no, I hate that. That's a terrible idea. Like, I hate it when bands remix stuff and send it out.
That's funny.
I laughed about that. He's just like, no filter, just, no, that's a shit idea. Don't even do it.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, you got to respect that.
Gotta respect that. I'm not sure if we'll follow it.
I'll be honest with you. And I was about to say, as a fan, I would love to hear some of these raw cuts and stuff of this record.
Yeah, I mean, someday maybe we'll put it on some kind of bonus LP or something. So hopefully it'll be a live day someday. So, because my versions are a little bit different from what you hear on the album. So
I'd always be interested to hear that. Yeah, because I think that would be. It gives you a different dynamic to the songs too.
Yeah, it's definitely a different dynamic for sure. But yeah. So Terror, by the way, the very last vocal on the track, was a vocal from the album, actually I think it was from What's to Come.
Okay.
And it was Eric's line. It was, mankind will never surrender, therefore never be defeated. And that was kind of that. Me and Mike were like, we've got to end the album with that, because that's a sick line. Basically saying, we won the battle, we won the war, and so I grabbed that line of What's to Come and put it on this album, and then backed Eric up. So it's both of our voices kind of, mankind will never surrender, therefore never be defeated.
That's awesome.
The very last growl on that song, Eric it's kind of a send off. It's like his voice going out into space, and then the last track is Onward. And
right.
That was actually written by Craig Peters. Kind of a side thing. He had written it a while ago. He was a big Viking show fan.
Okay.
Eric and I are both Swedish, so we have Viking ancestry.
Awesome.
And we wrote a lot of Viking songs when we were doing Deeds, just because we liked singing about that kind of stuff. So that was kind of our Viking funeral send off for Eric, and that's why it's called Onward. It's our way of saying rest in peace, onward, because I don't believe his soul is dead. I believe he's out there somewhere, you know, even his wife would tell me, you know, Eric's not of this world. His soul is not of this world.
Right.
You know, there was always something a little different about Eric. You know, musically, he was a genius, man. He did things so differently, and that was part of the pressure of this album, because I knew, you know, we would always come to practice, me and him, and I'd be like, okay, I found out a way to sing this line, and I would say it, and it sounded really cool to me, and then he would come and go, well, how about if we do it this way? And I always seemed to like his version a little better, you know, and so he was a genius that way when writing vocal patterns, songs, and so for me, there was a lot of pressure to get it right, and I'm just glad it came out good, and it's getting a good response. I'm happy about that. You know, our music's never been critically acclaimed, mostly because people maybe it flies over their head, and they give it one listen, and that's it. And our records are the kind of thing you got to listen to 10 times before it really starts setting in. You know what I mean?
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely.
So we've never been critically acclaimed, and most of the reviews I see coming back are pretty good. It's got
raving reviews. Everything I've seen on it, I've not seen anything bad, and it's like I said, I think a lot of people are just happy to have Deeds back. You know, like doing the record out, and then
me included.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's and that's what actually was my next question for you. So you got Nucleus, and it's there pending COVID. Are you guys wanting to do any touring for this thing, or?
That's kind of you know, if the demand is there, we've got a core group of guys that we could easily play shows with. Full-on touring is probably out of the question, mostly because the bass player and myself, we have full-time business.
Sure.
And I can't afford to leave my business for a month at a time.
Sure. Maybe some festivals?
Some festivals in the future, maybe some one-off big shows, you know. But, yeah, I can see it happening, you know, depending on what happens with this planet. But we'll see, man.
Well, one more thing I wanted to ask you about, if it's okay, was the cover art. I love it.
Yeah, that was the brainchild of ourselves and Raymond Swanland. And basically, we told the story to Raymond, the story of Nucleus, which, you know, Nucleus was Eric's album name. And so we were adamant about not changing that. But we had to write a story about what is the Nucleus. And that was the hard part, man. And so we told this story to Swanland. We said, okay, look, the nucleus is kind of like a parasite that once it attaches to the brainstem, it kind of unloads man's full brain potential, which in turn gives him powers over matter and all this other stuff, you know.
Right.
So basically, it turns a small army of men into an unstoppable force.
Right.
And so kind of our story was, okay, there's these creatures that have been sent to Earth, you know, and it kind of marries together aliens with old Norse Viking sea monsters with, you know, futuristic, you know, technology as well, and so getting all that into one piece of art was kind of tough, but dude, he nailed it, you know. And if you look at the first guy, he's wearing a banner across his chest that says Eric, and
that's awesome.
And you know, that we had to have him on the cover somehow. So you know, that was kind of a marriage of, you know, our Viking ancestry and getting him on the album. Yeah, so I mean, Swanland is an amazing artist. I'm just humbled that he's doing it for us, man.
Man, it's like I said, this album is the whole package, everything, and I think it's as you said earlier, to quote you, it's a beautiful marriage of the old with the new. Yeah. And then, of course, Nucleus is available now, folks. Deeds of Flesh, Nucleus from Unique Leader Records. Jacoby Kingston, sir, I cannot thank you enough for doing this. We've wanted you guys on the podcast for so long, and I'm sorry we never got to get Eric. It's never happened, but I cannot thank you enough for doing this. This is a huge thing for me. Thank you for taking the time to do this today. I'm excited to promote this record any way that I can. So,
hey, we appreciate that. Thanks for everything. Thanks out there to all the Deeds Legion. and we're not going away. The legacy is not dead. It's just taking a little turn.
I love it, man. Like I said, this record is fucking fantastic. It is so good. I really love it. And you guys just, everything about it, it's a perfect marriage of the old with the new. It's perfectly well said. It's great.
Thanks, brother.